Okay, gang, final recording. This is chapters 11, 12, and 13, and then we're Paul with Pearl Harbor Child, a child's eyewitness view from Attack to Peace by Auntie Dorinda Makanaonalani Nicholson. Chapter 11, Surrender Document Signed on Battleship USS Missouri. By the end of the war, I had become used to having spent most of my childhood surrounded by the sights and sounds, the comings and goings of troops, and the headlines of war. One of those headlines caused great confusion and concern in my family and many others. It told about something called the atomic bomb and how it had been exploded in Japan and had wiped out a city, killing many people. We wondered how a single bomb could do so much damage. Radio newscasts also told the gruesome details of the enormous devastation that resulted. And then President Harry S. Truman made a radio broadcast to explain the American action. He said, "I realize the tragic significance of the atomic bomb. Having found the bomb, we have used it. We have used it against those who attacked us without warning at Pearl Harbor. We shall continue to use it until we completely destroy Japan's power to make war. Only a Japanese surrender will stop us." Shortly thereafter came the Japanese surrender. When President Truman gave the announcement, the release from the tension of all the war years was electrifying, and our concern over the terrible bomb was put aside as the entire world sighed with relief at the prospect of peace. The high emotions were replaced by a feeling of solemnity for the signing that ended World War II on September 2nd, 1945, shortly after 9 a.m. The formal ceremony took place in Tokyo Bay aboard the battleship USS Missouri as our B-29 bombers circled watchfully overhead. General Douglas MacArthur presided over the ceremony on the great ship's deck, flanked by Admirals Halsey and Nimitz, plus many others. Foreign Minister Shigemitsu and General Umezu signed for the Japanese delegation. Admiral Nimitz signed for the United States, and General MacArthur signed as the Supreme Allied Commander. The years of war were ended by a few marks on paper. When MacArthur accepted the surrender documents, he said, "Let us pray that peace be now restored to the world and that God will preserve it always. These proceedings are now closed." Times have changed since that day on the USS Missouri. No one could have foreseen how the former enemies, Japan and America, would evolve into allies and friends. This is truly an amazing turn of events. But warm feelings are still not unanimous. There are some Americans whose hatred is so deep and whose loss of family or friends was so great that they are still unable to forgive and forget. Still, there are others who say, "Well, it's been 16 years now. When you stop and think about it, the Japanese soldiers were doing their jobs and we were doing ours. It just happened that our jobs were to kill each other." For those who are willing to face the difficulty of healing old wounds, a special ceremony was held on December 6, 2000, at a special place, on the very same deck where the World War II treaty was signed. A group of Japanese veterans, 3 of whom actually participated in the Pearl Harbor attack, returned to the harbor for this ceremony. One of them was Zenji Abe, who flew a torpedo bomber on December 7, 1941, and who had become great friends with our friend Richard Fisk, the bugler from the USS West Virginia. Both men were asked to speak to those assembled and describe how they felt about what was happening. It was a very emotional experience for everyone. There were speeches in English and Japanese, with translation into both languages. Finally, a row of American veterans stood facing a row of their former enemies. It was a special moment, and I held my breath, wondering if anything would disturb this unique occasion. But thankfully, nothing happened. No one moved until the two facing rows shook hands and exchanged Hawaiian leis in a symbol of friendship. Then, all those present were invited to place their signatures on two large banners, one to be sent to Japan and the other to remain in Hawaii. Larry, my husband, and I also signed the banners, grateful to be witnesses to this historic moment. Chapter 12. The Navy Takes Our Home. The surrender treaty was signed in September, and in October, I celebrated my 10th birthday. Mom and Dad surprised me with a new dress that came all the way from the mainland. The dress had beautiful embroidery on the skirt, and even a matching blue beanie hat with red trim. On that birthday in peacetime Hawaii, our family thought we could always live in Pearl Harbor. But it was not to be. We tried very hard to keep our home, but now that the fighting was over, the Navy could concentrate on moving the civilian locals out of the harbor. My dad formed the Pearl City Peninsula Association to join with our neighbors to see if we could keep from losing our land. The association wrote letters to the newspapers about the United States Navy intimidating ordinary working people who were the natives of the islands and stealing our homes. We put up a long, hard fight, but all civilian property was condemned on the peninsula. We had to sign our deed over to the Navy, and then we were required to pay rent. By this time, most of our neighbors gave up and left. Some took their houses with them. One of my last memories of Jean Street was our Filipino neighbor's house, cut in two like a deli sandwich, being towed down our street away from the harbor. Finally, it was time to leave. I didn't want to go. The only life I had known had been that of a child of the harbor, of crab nets, fishing off the pier, Pan American China clippers, and a world war. A few other civilians had hurriedly left as soon after December 7th as they could, but our family never wanted to leave, and we were among the last civilians to do so, staying in our house in Pearl City until my junior year of high school. We had doggedly held out for more than 7 years after the war ended. Still feeling the emotional ties to the harbor, we knew we could never completely leave it. So we built our new home up in the hills of Halava Heights, where we could see the harbor from every room, although now it was from quite a distance. It was close enough, however, that if I looked just forward of Ford Island, I could barely see the movement of the American flag that still flew proudly from the temporary platform over the sunken remains of the battleship USS Arizona. Chapter 13. A Sad Farewell to the Harbor. Then, as now, I still say goodbye so regretfully, feeling that my soul is a part of the harbor and peninsula. I can't explain the feeling, except that my old home is so full of emotions and memories for me. Each time I return, the harbor and pier beckon me to the water's edge. I look for the Pan American clipper marker detailing the landing of the first clipper plane from the mainland. Close by is another marker noting that a midget Japanese submarine had also shared this part of the harbor, but on a secret, deadly mission on a fateful December morning many years ago. When I look at my old pier, it pains me to see that it has aged even more, and now it has been barricaded because of wood rot. But I still see it through the eyes of a child as the place where I spent many hours with my crab nets. This is where I rode my bicycle as faithful hula girl ran along beside me. Just down the pier along the coastline is where the cracked foundation still sits empty of the old Pan American Clipper base. A banyan tree now grows where the old Palms Hotel burned in the fiery crash of the American fighter plane off the USS Enterprise. Our own guns mistakenly shot him down the evening of December 7, 1941. Across the channel, I search for a glimpse of the rusting hull of the USS Utah laying on its side. It's difficult to see her now that Navy housing fills the horizon. Each part of my journey along the harbor shoreline floods me with memories, not only of the day the bombs fell, but of a farewell to a childhood lost in a world war. The final farewell to the harbor finds me at the silent gray marble wall in the USS Arizona Memorial. As a child of the harbor, the memory of the day the bombs fell will remain with me always.